Today, we're going to hear from an entrepreneur that had 3 successful exits and is also a significant investor in exact match domain names. In fact, he has a brand new startup where he's using a killer exact match domain coupled with his gaming knowledge and experience to revolutionize the educational learning industry. It's a great interview that goes into a ton of detail about domains and startups. You do not want to miss this interview. Stay tuned. I have 3 short sponsor messages before we get into today's show. First, if you're a domain name investor, you have unique intellectual property needs, and you need an IP attorney that understands them, that follows the industry, and can help you navigate UDRP, copyright, and trademark laws. David Westlow of Wiley Ryan is the lawyer to call for internet legal issues. Second, if you have a great domain name and nothing to show when people visit, you're missing out on potential advertising revenue, leads, and partnership opportunities. NicheWebsites.com can build your site quickly with a price option to suit any need. But as their tagline says, they don't just build websites, they build businesses. Finally, if you're buying or selling a domain name or a portfolio and you want an estimate of its value, Estabot.com is the place to go. Just like you'd visit Zillow.com to get an estimate of a house value, Estabot.com provides key information about the most important statistics so you can make an informed decision based on data. All 3 sponsors have a clickable banner in the upper right-hand corner of DomainSherpa.com. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name investor and entrepreneur directly from the expert. Today, we've got a fantastic education startup that we're going to learn about, and it's being led by one of the nicest guys you've ever met. I had the honor of interviewing him on stage at the Traffic Conference in October 2011, and I've been a big fan of his ever since. So today's big question is this: how do you gamify the education experience to help kids learn better and faster? Joining us to answer this question is Bill Karamouzis, CEO and co-founder of Teach Me. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks Mike. Happy to be here. And
It's great to have you here, bud. For anyone that doesn't know you, I need to give a quick rundown on your background. Bill's an entrepreneur and online media specialist. He founded FPS Networks and developed the popular gaming websites FlashPlayer.com and AddictingGames.com. In 2005, you sold both of those, Bill, to media conglomerates Viacom, who at the time was Atom Entertainment, and Hearst, who at the time was UGO Entertainment. Then just 3 years later, in 2008, Bill, you launched Hall Pass Media, a collection of gaming websites with thousands of games and millions of monthly users, which you then sold in 2011 to MindJolt, a company founded by Chris DeWolf, who is the famous founder and former CEO of MySpace. And if you want to hear the full story, you can search for Bill Karamouzis on Domain Sherpa and watch that interview from Traffic 2011. It's in the Domain Sherpa archives, and it's well worth your time. So my first question is this, Bill: do you ever take time off?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty busy schedule. We actually had a little bit of downtime when I left SGN. Had around 3 months where there wasn't a major project that was going on, but even in that time we built a couple side projects. So not too much time off, but I enjoy it. So it's not like I'm working. It just varies if I'm getting actually paid for it or not. So it's a hobby. So not time off.
Great. Well, and so you've just launched mathgames.com. Congratulations. You had an article write-up in albertaventures.com and DN Journal. Your latest cover story. I'll have links to both of those underneath this interview so people can go and read those. So I want to start off with, why Math Games? What are you trying to change with launching mathgames.com?
Well, Math Games, I mean, it was quite a few different things that made me want to do it. Even back in 2008, it was a genre education, which is something that I really wanted to have in Hall Pass Media. We targeted female gamers, younger gamers. We tried to go male, different demographics. But education was something that we couldn't really get into. We just couldn't find the right domains, and the games were really poorly done. So just from a gamer's perspective, as someone that's distributed games and developed games, I found it to be really poor. And I thought this would be great. It's an area that we could make some really cool stuff. The reason why we started getting more serious and we're able to get into it now is after the sale of Hall Pass Media, I still felt nothing had really significantly changed in that area of gaming. And people have made really good games and creative games, but I looked at gaming and I looked at what people were doing on iPads, and I have children, and I started downloading different apps, and they're full of different kind of messages that you'd kind of not really want. You don't want to upsell a 3-year-old, and the gaming experience was really terrible. And so I thought, it's people who aren't really passionate about gaming or education that are making a lot of these games. They're just kind of exploiting, I think, maybe a flaw on the market, because people are focused on bingo games, casino games, really big titles that monetize well. And maybe education is one of those areas that just isn't attractive yet. Right. And just seeing the experience, I felt, this doesn't tie into any of the stats that we provide. We can have really good insights into what children are doing at any age, even if it's kindergarten, even before kindergarten. How many questions did you get right? Where did you struggle? All these kind of things that as a gamer you can see. We collect all of these stats, but we weren't doing that, or these apps that I was downloading, and I was going through quite a few, weren't doing any of that. So I felt this is going to be a pretty fun project, and I think that we can do a lot of cool stuff in it. And so those are some of the reasons why we went into it. Why we picked math is because some of the things that you look at from how big can we make this? I mean, math is universal. And one of the greatest things about it is with some language translation, you standardize it across the whole board, so people all over the world can be playing on a level playing field and competing and doing all sorts of things that I think are going to drive up engagement. Competition, in my opinion, is one of the best ones. Friendly competition, but it is interesting to have leaderboards and see what countries rank, or what states or provinces or what schools, and we can do all that with math because we can standardize it, so you're getting kind of the same thing across the board.
Very cool. And so I've gone to mathgames.com. It's a slick interface. It is beautifully designed. You have great caricatures and icons, and there's a lot of white space. It's much different from the gaming experience that you've had in the past. We both used to play Ultima Online and all those fun games. But what I didn't see on the website was the business model.
Yeah, I mean, right now it is a bit vague, and it is vague because we're working on it as we go. The main focus right now is actually product. A lot of times when we discuss this, it's what are we going to look at, monetizing, or how are we going to do it? I feel like you have to earn the right to really charge people now, and until you add that value, I feel like we're focusing on the wrong thing. When I think of at what point do I want to be able to say, okay, let's start charging people for a portion or add-ons to the service. I want like the Netflix effect, where the first time I logged into Netflix, I was blown away. I could not believe that this was $7 or $8 or whatever I paid at the time. And I think that we can do the same thing, and that's what I want to do. So until we've added enough content and value and got the feedback that we have, we're going to be focused exclusively on product. Yeah. If we want to say, okay, we've achieved that, now where are we going to look to monetize? It's a few different opportunities. One of them is advertising. That I prefer to stay away from because I think that it degrades the whole product experience, and the whole career has been a balance between great product and horrible advertising. So if I can, I'd like to stay away from that. But that is one. That's kind of the baseline. The other opportunity that I think that we have is, as a company, when you look at reaching people on mobile devices, it's incredibly difficult. You look at iTunes Store, any kind of distributor online of mobile products, and it's like a funnel. You have this thousands or hundreds of thousands of apps, and they funnel down into a little list of 10. And if you're not on that list, discovery is really, really difficult. Well, with education, our apps don't monetize well. They're not going to beat out the games that are upselling you constantly. Right. And so you're never going to really be able to acquire users at a rate that makes sense. And to get on those lists, a lot of times you have to acquire users as part of kind of getting that viral effect. Is maybe you try to find some users, advertise to them, they tell their friends, and you kind of build this little virtuous cycle that kind of lifts the whole game up in the rankings. It's difficult for educational games to do that. So what we think is a good way of approaching it is you have the web, which is really open, a lot of people using it, build this platform for free, get people to understand, okay, Teach Me powers this, has some authority in the space with great analytics, and then distribute games from our website and use our website to kind of promote these games in the iTunes Store. So we own kind of the whole ecosystem where we're not depending on the fluctuating rates of advertisers and whether or not the quality is good or whether the users are, real or they want the product or they're loyal or all these things. We're taking users on our existing platform and moving them kind of to the mobile devices. So I think that's a big opportunity because we've been successful in the past at our previous company when we were making games for kids, and they were playing on the web and millions of people on the web, and we took that and it was just a powerful funnel and we targeted towards the games on iOS devices, and we were pretty successful because most mobile developers don't have that big web background that they can push to iOS and Android devices. So that's one opportunity. A lot of our competitors use the subscription model method where they're charging a fee. Again, that's something that we would consider. I really, whatever features we roll out with, we're going to grandfather in, so the majority of our product will always be free. I don't think that we want to be a company that prevents people from learning, and I think a lot of these paywalls do that. And it's not because the fees are high, although in some cases $100 a month is quite high. I think it just blocks people that parents don't want to give their credit cards and things like that, and then you're preventing someone from kind of being on your platform. So we're really going for growth and we're going for users, and at that point I think we'll be able to see what the best business opportunity is that doesn't degrade the product, because this is a lot more about the product than it is about how to make the most money. It sounds quite odd. I mean, we do want to create something of value and make money doing it, but we want to have something that we're really proud of. And coming from a background of selling ads for 15 years, it's fine to kind of take the foot off the throttle and focus on a bit more on the product. So
definitely. So if clearly math games are an enormous market. I've got young kids in school, and I've thought about what are the best ways to teach math to my kids. I volunteered in class, and I know that teachers love to go to computer lab and love to have a well-developed software system that they can just tell the kids, go to this website and start doing different lessons and get feedback, and sometimes they have to go through and do it again, and they'll do that for like 15 or 20 minutes and then they'll switch to another subject. If you look at the market for trying to solve this problem of producing a better gaming experience that has friendly competition and allows kids to learn in a more effective way, do you know how big the market is? Have you guys thought about even how to quantify that?
I mean, there are a number of studies that kind of, you can look and see how many educational downloads are going through like Apple, and they release those figures. And the overall market, I think it's a bit vague of what you consider educational software and where it starts and where it stops.
Yeah.
And are we really a competitor to certain systems that they might include in those kind of figures? So we haven't gone to try to quantify. We think the opportunity is large enough that by tackling this problem, we'll be able to kind of take a significant size, and if we can, that'd be enough to sustain a valuable company. And we get those figures just from strictly the gaming side. If you look at the education side, there are competitors out there.
Bill, right when we got cut off there, you were talking about the market sizes, and you've quantified the market size for games, and you've quantified the market size for education on iTunes, for example. If you had to put a number across the whole thing, what would you think the size of that marketplace might be?
I haven't attempted to do that, but I think it's hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. Just education is one of the most popular sections in iOS.
Yeah.
And so I really don't think that would change our opportunity. I think the size is so big that whether the number is $1 billion or $2 billion or 500 million, the size has always been enough that we didn't really focus too much on what that number would be. Sure. Although it would be good. Eventually, I'll try to quantify that as much as we can so we can present something if we had to. But at this point, it really is not an issue.
So let's talk about who's behind this new venture, Bill. Can you tell me who the key team members are and how many people are involved and where you're working?
Sure. So it's myself and my co-founder, Reese Jones. And Reese he was my first employee, and now he's a partner in this venture. And so he's been the technical kind of side and that's why he was brought on initially, is because I wasn't able to keep up with all the traffic. And so he's the co-founder, and we have 11 people. Half of them are here in Edmonton, and we're working in a co-location environment, which you see behind me, which is we rent out a space, and we're kind of clustered in that space, and people are all over the place, and it's a pretty neat environment. The rest of the team is scattered around the world, and we do that because it's just trying to find really talented people requires you to go in different places. There's a saying that there's only 10 really good JavaScript developers in any one country. So I didn't believe that, but I mean, you definitely need to be willing to go wherever they are. And we're able to do that. We have development going virtually around the clock, which is kind of neat because nothing kind of sits idle for too long.
Yeah.
But it's 11 people. We've been lucky to get some really, really brilliant people on this. One of them, unfortunately, just left because he's going to get his PhD in plasma physics from Princeton. So
Wow.
virtually everyone on the team is smarter than me and better than math in every way, and not virtually every single person. So it's a neat kind of team that we put together. So
Excellent. And so you are a startup. You have 11 people. You're in a startup environment, so there's a lot of action going on. Typically, startups are funded by either angel investors, or they've taken some seed money, or they've got venture capital behind them, like your last firm had, Hall Pass Media. How are you funding this new venture?
Well, it's funded entirely by myself, taking some of the proceeds from the previous sale and just using it to do this. This is something that I really want to do, and I think by funding it myself, I can really focus on the product and start the company off in a way that I want to. If we go to someone and really have to explain the model without showing it, I think that we'd be using a lot of time up that. I'd rather just focus on the product, prove it out, and like I said, in 6 months, the way that I present the story is less important to the numbers I think I can present. Because if you have these really solid numbers that anyone can look at, then the story becomes really easy to sell. And I don't have to put on the salesman hat, which I'm kind of an introverted person. I don't think that I would do that very well. But if I have some good numbers, we can talk, we can walk through them, we can see what value we provide. And I think to an investor potentially that's in this space, I think they'll look at those numbers and be like, okay, that's great. Your team, you executed, you have some previous success. Let's go with it. Right now, I would just be conceptualizing, I think, too much more than I'd like to be. I'd rather come to the table with something and see if funding is even the answer, because by using things like this environment that we work in and other things that we've done to keep our costs pretty low, I think our burn rate is pretty sustainable, and I think that we won't need to monetize that at a rate that other companies would have or having to be sustainable in the long run. So we'll probably cross that bridge and start looking, like I said, after 6 months, once I think the product is ready, and see what the longer term future is. And if we can't achieve the growth that we want because of funds, then that's when I look at it. But if we can keep achieving the growth that we're doing, and it's just a matter of bootstrapping and working through it, then we'll probably continue doing it that way.
Hey, Bill, which came first? The idea for the business or the domain name mathgames.com? I should say, which came first, the idea for the business or the acquisition of the domain name mathgames.com?
Yeah, looking for the right domains. I mean, there's many different areas of curriculum. Math is one of them, but there are other areas, and the kind of theory of using games to kind of drive education can be applied to many different subjects. So we went for math, went for a few other ones, and it just wasn't there. I wasn't able to close the deals, and the idea was there, and we were already busy with the Hall Pass Media. I mean, it was already operational. We didn't need to have this other division, although I wanted it, quite badly. And so the idea came first. Being able to secure math games and kind of getting to that point really just accelerated it, because there were alternatives. Of course, in any venture, you don't have to get any single name for it to be successful. So we could have gone live on a different domain, but getting that one, and when it happened, it really kind of motivated us to get this to market as quick as we could.
Yeah.
Since Math Games, I bought languagearts.com, and that's another area that the Common Core has developed standards for. And initially, TeachMe would have been kind of our default if we had to run it all on TeachMe, and just that's a fantastic name in itself. So the fact that we got Math Games, big bonus. If we didn't, we would have ran it on TeachMe, and I still think it would have been there, but definitely having the type in traffic in math games, we hope will accelerate it. So
Yeah, so let's talk about type in traffic. Google AdWords keyword tool estimates the search volume of the exact match phrase math games to be 550,000 per month in the US. That's massive.
yeah, it's I mean, the entire industry doesn't know how big math games are. It's even I didn't really believe it, and seeing other parts of gaming and having the same effect, and they're kind of like cooking games, for example, was this thing that when I seen it, I couldn't believe how many people were searching for it. So yeah, the volume is massive. The type in traffic it's one of the largest I've ever seen on a purely generic name that isn't, a typo or a variation of an existing site. It's just two words put together. So yeah, it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit of traffic.
So in 2010, you were a cover story for Ron Jackson's dnjournal.com, and Ron wrote, quote, "Few domain sales have set more tongues wagging than one reported in our first weekly sales column of this year. CookingGames.com changed hands for a stunning $350,000. But even when we had carefully verified the sale with reliable sources, a lot of people, even industry veterans, had a hard time believing the transaction was real, quote unquote. To you, however, $350,000 wasn't out of the realm of acceptable because you knew the value of the keywords, you knew how big the audience was, how many people were searching for it. So that, of course, leads me to my next question. How much did you pay for mathgames.com?
So Math Games was $725,000. It was one of the largest purchases that I've ever made for a domain. It'll probably be one of the largest purchases this year. So yeah, it was a big domain, and the seller was not overly motivated because of that type of traffic. It was making part income the same way Cooking Games was making $50,000 a year part. So the motivation to sell it isn't that high when you're getting this income, whether you're dead or alive. Pretty much, you're getting all this income. So Math Games had the same attributes, just at a larger scale.
When did you close the acquisition for mathgames.com?
It was in the first quarter, so it was, we bought it and then we had to finalize some kind of internal shareholder documents with Reese and myself, so probably in January.
Yeah, and did you buy it from a domain name investor or a math teacher, or what was sort of the persona of the person that previously owned it?
The persona is, I mean this in a nice way, but I mean I think that he's quite crazy. I don't know much about him other than he lives somewhere in Asia and lives sometimes in the States. And I emailed him back and forth since 2008, and he's completely erratic. And he seems very, very nice via email, but I don't know much about him.
Huh.
And that's quite common in the purchases that I've done. Is I don't know very much about the people that I buy from. But I think he did have a portfolio, and he'd like to really keep his privacy, and told him what I wanted to do with it and what the plan was. And then he just came around one day it was just a very odd email that I received, and he was willing to go, and I closed it as quickly as I could because I didn't want to.
Were you worried that the transaction was just going to fall apart because of your prior conversations with him over email?
I didn't put any hopes into it because I didn't know, although I wanted it to close, because the way that using escrow.com works is you have to fund it. So, you do have to go through these process of funding, the whole thing. And then, if he doesn't come through, I mean, you want it to close if you're going through it. It was a completely smooth transaction. And if I didn't have conversations with him prior, I would have thought he was a completely normal person.
Do you remember back to your very first communication with him where you made an offer to him to try and get him motivated? Do you remember what that number was?
I think it was probably around 300,000.
Wow.
And I think he just said thanks.
Because he was making enough revenue off of parking, I guess, that...
I seriously underestimated how much was even going there. So I knew when I said that and he didn't even counter that, it got me thinking, okay, well, if Cooking Games is making this, and maybe this is making, who knows what. And so I really just kind of kept going up, and then I'm like, at a certain point mentally, I'm like, I've countered myself too many times. It's ridiculous. And step away and then come back. And he was always polite and friendly about the conversations. I think a lot of times he just ignored me, which is normal for this stuff when people just aren't interested in selling. But
that's funny.
Eventually came around. The Teach Me domain I bought from a Stanford professor, and he was a really nice person. He's the only person I ever had to speak to on the phone to do a domain transaction. And so when I seen the email, I said, I'd like to speak with you. I didn't know what to expect. And he was very, very nice, and they explained kind of some of the stuff that we would be trying. And he didn't want us to flip the domain, actually, because he was concerned that as a domain investor that I would take it and I had a buyer in tow. And so we put a clause in there for 2 years that if we sold it, he'd be entitled to profit, just to kind of make him secure that wasn't my motivation. And
right.
It worked out okay, and now I think that he can be someone that hopefully we can look to advise us on some of the stuff that we're doing. So he owned that, and Language Arts, which is kind of part of the package, was just owned by a domain investor. They were looking to sell it. There wasn't very much interesting on that sale. It was just a very standard, would you like to sell, and a bit of back and forth. So.
Yeah. So on the valuation of mathgames.com, $725, if I go to Google and I do their Google AdWords keyword tool, I can see that it's a 65-cent cost per click for the keyword phrase math games. It's relatively high, but given the volume that happens per month, it's massive. If I plug those numbers into the Rosner equation, where Andrew Rosner has come on and talked about how he values generic keyword phrases like math games, it puts the value at around, none of this is hard in stone, but it puts it around $1.5 million. If I plug it into Estabat.com, which looks at the same sort of factors, but it also looks at other sales and things like that, it puts it at $245,000. It's a big range, which any domain name broker would say, yeah, it's going to be a big range because domains like this don't come around very often. They don't sell very often. And when there are sales, they're not public, unlike yours. Do you feel that $725 was a fair price at the time, or do you feel that you overpaid thinking that it would appreciate in value?
I think, well, first off, that I think that Andrew's equation is better. I think, no, I with everything that I buy, I think that I overpaid. And I think that I overpaid until I develop it, and it's a mentality that I have because it makes me not want to sit and be idle on it. So no matter what the price is, I think I overpaid on languagearts.com because it's sitting there, and $11,000, $11,500, it's a lot of money. Doesn't, in any economy, it's still a lot of money. It's not valuable until I built it out, and so I've overpaid for it. Now, if you want to look at like absolute numbers, did I overpay? And I think probably I could have probably maybe got it on for a bit less if I would have been more aggressive on negotiation and willing to lose that opportunity, that window that he was available for. I probably would have got it for less. Weighing that against the opportunity of having it and building it was just one of those things where sometimes when you really want something, you're going to have to overpay. And if you're willing to do that, it's kind of, what do you want to be working on? And if we can make that sacrifice, then it's something that I was willing to do. So, but yeah, I mean, it's an expensive domain for sure. And to just leave it parked, it wouldn't have made sense to do that. It wouldn't have made sense just to buy it and park it. So.
Right. People often wonder about type-in traffic, Bill, and you said that the type-in traffic was higher than you had anticipated earlier in the show. I want to check my numbers. According to an estimate of data I looked up on Estabat.com, they have this little area where they gathered information from the past and they use it sort of as a proxy for type-in traffic going forward. I was amazed that they had this data, and I was surprised when a couple of domain names that I have that have much less type-in traffic than yours, it was actually right on an order of magnitude. So Estabat thinks that mathgames.com receives about 1,700, 1,800 type-ins per day. That's people just typing in mathgames.com. Can you confirm that metric on an order of magnitude basis?
Yeah, it's definitely within the range. I mean, the domain is very seasonal, of course, as you'd expect. But yeah, it's
so down in summer, up in fall, throughout the school year, down in Christmas holiday time period.
Yeah, in certain areas, like in Christmas, like leading up to the big holiday break, it it had a lot of traffic, historically. So it follows a bit of the same pattern that casual gaming websites follow. So it's a pattern that I'm kind of familiar with in terms of seasonality. When people are in front of their computers, it's popular. When they're not, in summer it dips down. So, but yeah, 1,700 I think would be a fair average. It's spiked to like 3,500, which is a lot, especially in this day and age. Probably at 2008, it was probably at over 5,000.
Wow, per day.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me if it was.
Fantastic. So you talked about in the DN Journal article about you that you said in addition to the domains that you purchased from Chris Chena, you purchased portfolios from iREIT, Marchex, and a number of other domain investors. In total, you spent over $4 million on domain investments in the last 2 years. If you spent $725,000 on math games, how many other domain names did you purchase for $4 million?
Oh, yeah. So that figure, though, is over a period since 2008. So the figure is longer. The range is longer. But, I mean, having domains like animation.com and draw.com, executivemba.com, marketreport.com. So gone through and purchased just a lot of really good names and things that I thought that might be interesting to build out at one time and another. And when we came back from Los Angeles, that was one of the things that we did. We took our portfolio and looked at all these opportunities, and the one that stuck in my head, and I just couldn't get rid of that desire to do something in that space, was education and gaming and see if we can make it better. So, we have a pretty good portfolio of quality stuff that I'd be happy if everything in it got built out. Small jobs is another example of something that is neat, and I think that we could do something there. So. Yeah,
so you don't necessarily own all those domain names still?
Exactly. Some of them have been sold. Ones that I think, okay, I'm never going to be able to develop this domain name. It's just there's too much backlog, and I'm not as passionate as I was when I bought it.
Right.
Look to sell it.
Gotcha. So, did you buy any single domain name for over $1 million, Bill?
If you look at the portfolio, depending on how you chop up the value, then maybe you could say that.
Yeah.
But it'd be subject to kind of interpretation.
Sure.
Dress Up was a domain name that was really expensive.
Yeah. But Dress Up, didn't you use that one for Hall Pass Media?
It was in Hall Pass Media, yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just insanely expensive. And it was because actually what happened with that site is it received around 5,000 type in a day from kids looking to do fashion kind of, or to do dress up things, dress up dolls, interact with things like that online. But the reason why I made so much money is because advertisers on that page were advertising cosmetics and clothing and higher kind of value items. So you drove this gaming crowd into a funnel of really kind of higher end advertisements, and it just ended up working. That it made a lot of income that way.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It was quite expensive. Animation.
So I know a lot of investors who have good domain portfolios think about developing all the time. You have a phenomenal portfolio. You and I have talked. I know some of the domain names that you have, and in addition to mathgames.com, which is clearly public, and you've got a great partner. That was your partner in Hall Pass Media. You two are co-founders in TeachMe and mathgames.com. But Reese didn't buy the domain names. You bought the domain names. Now, I'm sure Reese did well from selling Hall Pass Media as well, and he was locked into an employment agreement with the previous owner, and I'm sure did well, and I don't know any of those details. But a lot of domain investors are probably wondering, how did you structure going forward with your co-founder, given that you own the domain names that were bringing in traffic on day one?
Yeah, I think domainers a lot of them seem to think it's a very complex process. The way that we're structured is the company actually owns them. So we have a company, and the company buys them and creates income, and it's run, maybe because of the previous 3 sales, it's run like a pretty, normal organization would run, even though there isn't a lot of people behind it. So the company went and purchased the domains, and I'm listed there as an owner, but the company owns them, and I'm the majority shareholder of the company, and Reese has a significant portion in the company, which translates to having a significant portion of the domains that we developed. So it wasn't overly difficult. I don't think that domainers, if they find someone that they really want to partner with, I don't think that should be the excuse of not being able to strike up a partnership, because I'm not going to give corporate structuring advice, but I mean, it seems that you can just put it underneath the corporation and buy the shares, and if that's the only asset, then you kind of have yourself.
So if you're both putting in your time, let's say there was only two people in the startup, and one came with $725,000 worth of domain name assets that they are contributing to the company, and you're both going to split time, then you both just need to agree what the share split of the company, what the equity of the company is going to be.
Exactly, and wages and things like that. I mean, it all comes. The company has ongoing revenue because it has its portfolio, and so it's just taken out of it. And so it was a process, but it wasn't overly complex to get worked out. And also, of course, I've worked with Reese. I've known him since high school. He's one of the most brilliant technical people I know. So I mean, all those kind of things that might make someone worry or might put in like vesting and other things, which are definitely recommended in most cases, it wasn't an issue for us. So we were fortunate that we could do it like that. But for other people that are looking to bring on a partner, you'd probably do something like vesting and other things that you'd have to look into to kind of secure you didn't give away a big portion and the person didn't work out. If you're a majority owner, you're letting someone come in that doesn't have a really significant stake in the whole value of it. Which wasn't our case, but other people.
So you talked earlier about how buying mathgames.com sort of lit a fire underneath you to get going on it because you had a lot invested in it. And you talked about you could have bought a brandable domain name like mathgamesworld or emathgames.com or something like that for, relatively pennies compared. In your opinion, how important is a keyword generic domain name to the success of a business if, in your own words, the most important thing is the business itself, creating a user experience, making sure that kids are learning from this new environment that you're creating?
I mean, I often say that because people look at what I've done and they think, I'm just going to go out there and buy this domain. And there wasn't all this infrastructure behind it. We didn't have a game library of 15,000 games and had spent 10 years doing it. And people went and rushed out and bought a bunch of game domains, and people would then ask me, how do I develop this? What's wrong? We have the same games as you on your site. Some people even ripped our sites and like, why aren't we, what? So definitely say that because I don't want people to get the perception that that's all that's there. So I mean, this thing is the way that I look at math games is kind of like an advertising tool. Branding, advertising, marketing, depending on how you want to structure it, they're saying. It comes with type-in traffic. To buy that traffic, to get that visibility, you mentioned 65 cents. Well, if that's the going rate and there's 700 people a day on it, let's say 1,000, you can kind of work that out and you get that figure. And so now I don't have to go out and I don't have to make those campaigns and I don't have to verify how successful they are. And when you're a startup, the way that we work is to manage a budget that size, it takes a person who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to lose a big advertising budget or spend it poorly. And I've seen that because all we've sold is advertising. I've seen mismatched campaigns that run on our site thinking, these guys are just wasting their money. No one is interested in this product. Why are they targeting us? And I didn't have enough time. I didn't want to be, using my time to do that. So getting this domain, it's almost like we have our marketing person, and that marketing person is, sending us 1,700, 2,000, 3,000 people a day and kind of off there working on his own or her own, and we're fine. So there's definite benefits, though, to building a brand on a more brandable name, not something that's so generic. And that kind of goes, if you look at search and you kind of look into search, we'll never have, even if we're the most popular from the term math space games, we'll never dominate those results the same way someone that had like Lollapalooza Math, where every result, or pretty much every result, would be going to their company. So there's a trade-off. Based on the success that we had with Hall Pass, I was willing to make that trade-off. But other people might be, really great at targeting users and buying them and like going through those exchanges. And for them, they'd probably love to have 700 grand, 725 grand to go and spend it and get the exact student or teacher or parent that they want on their site. So there's different ways to approach user acquisition. This is one that is quite simple, and because I know that the quality of natural type-in traffic is really high, I was comfortable doing it. But other people, you really need to understand the domain that you have and who's going to it and why. And factor.com was a good example. It changed based on whatever was going on in the news. When we had the housing crisis, the economic crisis happened, every question was about mortgages and things like that. And then if we had a health scare, all of a sudden all the ads are changing, all the people that are coming to fact.com are looking for health information. So the type in traffic that came to that site would be very hard to develop on, and that's where people can lose their shirts if they're buying a domain that they think is going to send them a certain type of person, and that person changes, and then that type of traffic is gone.
Yeah. So you're in a startup environment there, Bill. You've literally the location that you are has other startup companies in there, some of them funded, some of them not funded. What's your advice to other startups in Canada that tell you, Bill, every domain name is taken? Do you ever suggest that they go for a .co or a .io or a .me domain name?
I think I do, actually, and some people would be surprised, but you're validating an idea, and sometimes you can get a .co, build out the idea, build out the product, get it there. Don't go too aggressive on the .com until you build it. And I say that to, like, in a startup environment where we have tons of ideas going everywhere. And if everyone was going out there trying to buy the best .com on day one, they'd be stuck with a lot of inventory that isn't good. So .co, the greatest thing about it is it's cheap and it's available still. So go get your .co. If this thing has traction, or you've spent time and you're like, this is going, I'm committed, I really think I'm going to go for it, then before it gets too big, then you go for the .com. You don't have to get the .com on day one. When you're deep in product development, go for .co. Go for a country code if you're in an area that's popular. Like in Canada, .ca is very popular. In Germany, very popular. Many parts of the world. The United States, I think, your country code is basically .com, because I don't think .us is really taken off. But even .us, .io, there's many extensions you can get early on. But of course, know that if you wait too long, that .com is probably going to start receiving type-in traffic, spillover traffic from your venture, and you might end up paying more. It's a trade-off that you're going to have to manage, make business decisions that maximize your capital and how you want to deploy it. So
yeah. So anybody watching this that goes to mathgames.com, they can see that it's not a complete website, quote unquote. I think you might be missing privacy terms or things, but it's a beta launch, or it might even be an alpha launch. I'm not sure what you consider it, but you're targeting the fall when kids go back to school to have it up and running, right?
That's right. So we needed almost to launch this, because what happened was we came back from LA, we reached out to some local reporters and said, we're here, we're back, we're looking to build a team. It'd be great if we could just get some coverage and kind of get our names out, and ended up doing a pretty in-depth story on me, and we're at the kind of mercy of when they ran it live. So when we found out what issue it was going to go in, we really had to just launch. Ideally, we would have kind of waited maybe a little more, but at the same time, right now we don't even have a user sign in, so we're not collecting information about users, but definitely the kind of bits and pieces day by day are actually, if our build releases are kind of moving us every day a step closer. And we labeled our site saying it's beta, so you're participating in a product that's not finished, but you're still getting a lot of kind of the analytics and stuff like that are showing you, progressing you through, are still happening. So we needed to get it out there, because even internally for the team, it helps just to get something out there. You have people kind of knocking on your door in the form of type-in traffic, and I'd rather show them a product that needs improvement rather than a park page.
Yeah. So Reese is your co-founder is the technology wizard, making the site look beautiful and run and be scalable and be secure and all those things that are requirements for this type of endeavor. Usually the business co-founder will be out raising money, talking to investors, talking to the press. You are your own investor. You're funding it, so you don't have to spend your time doing that. What do you spend your time on with the startup right now?
Well, a lot of the time, the front end and actually the design and the layout and the kind of that interface has always been in my area because that's the stuff that I love doing.
Yeah.
So in terms of design, look, icons, how it flows, things like that, that's in my court of the technology side of it. In terms of a business plan, I still went through the process of completing it. It's very important. It's a pretty in-depth document. I'd recommend people go to Sequoia Capital's website, and there's an area where they have a business plan. And it'll ask you really tough questions. Well, I mean, it's tough depending on how you look at it, but getting really good answers for some of these questions is difficult, and it makes you think, and it makes you have to do your research. And so Sequoia Capital, definitely go to their website. And there are others, and you say which one's more beneficial than the next. But so actually did complete that and have been kind of engaging with investors to kind of see. It's just a matter of wanting to do it on favorable terms. And so doing that, managing the team, a lot of it is kind of managing kind of the technical process of how, when we release things, how we're doing it, managing people, because Reese also does code as well. So it's a pretty busy Trello board that we have, and so it usually takes more. It takes definitely more than one person to go through and kind of keep everyone on track, because things are pretty crazy right now.
Yeah. What's been your biggest hurdle to launching mathgames.com?
I think just learning what technologies would work best, because just the net is so fragmented. The coolest stuff the cutting edge stuff that you want to do, you look at it first, you're like, this is great, it's innovative, it works on like an iPad perfectly, and this is where education's going. Everyone has iPads,
right.
Perfect, design it for iPad. And then you look and we go live and we look at our stats and, oh great, well IE8 doesn't support what we're doing. So now we have to go back and it's like step by step, fix it for everyone going back, and we're the people that have 4-year-old browsers, and we're the people that have 10-year-old browsers. And so it's a process, and we've kind of worked our way through it. But
yeah, I spent a little bit of time developing apps for mobile phones, and just dealing in the iPhone iOS system was enough to drive you crazy with all the form factors. But nowadays, you're developing math games. Not only do you need it on old browsers, because schools haven't updated their browser, even though it's a security issue, but now your parents are going to fire it up on an Android or an iPad tablet, and then they're even going to hand their kids the phone, and they expect your system to sign in their kids and work exactly the way in a mobile format that it does on the desktop.
Yeah, and this is the first project we've ever done that were mobile first, tablet first, actually, because I think tablets are more important than mobile phones. And the neat thing is we built it, and it looks pretty good on the web, but where it really, I think, looks good, and what I really focused on when I was designing it was on a tablet. And you know, it was nice that when we launched it, we looked at all the different bounce rates. Of course, they're all higher than we'd like, but the one that was the lowest was on iOS devices. It was around half that other ones were. So if you look at it on an iPad, I think it looks pretty nice, and that's what we were happy. That was kind of a goal that we wanted. And now, like I mentioned, we got to go back and kind of optimize and tweak, and maybe we make custom versions, most likely for mobile devices, because questions and positions and formatting change. But it's a difficult process. I mean, it's fragmented, and before you could ignore mobile, and now it's kind of like you deal with that first. And whether you make an app in HTML5 and it works on your iPhone or your Android device, you have to look at distribution. So you have to think, okay, well, this HTML5 kind of application on the web works, but how are you going to get it out there? So now you have to look at, okay, well, let's bundle it into an app, and even though you're getting kind of the same experience, it's probably a little better when it's programmed specifically for a device. You need distribution on that platform. So from a developer perspective, it adds a lot of work, and you really need smart people that have worked on all these platforms that can tie it together. So we've been able to do that, and we haven't launched on iOS, but because of the technology we use, it's not going to be too far when we can do that. So.
Cool. All right, Bill, here's the final question for you. If you had to look back at your days years ago working as a website administrator for Alberta Health Services, so your day-to-day job was, managers would ask you to make changes to a website, and you would update the website before you started your gaming empires that exist today.
Yeah.
What's the one piece of advice that you'd offer to aspiring entrepreneurs like you were back then?
Yeah. Don't shy away from doing crappy work, because at entry level, that's really the kind of work that you're going to get. So if you have the if you have the perception that you're going to be getting all the best jobs, you're going to kind of be disappointed every day. So go in there and whatever you get, just approach it, do it well. Don't get caught up in what you're doing, because at an entry-level job, that's literally what it's about. And now, kind of where I'm at now, we have people that have interns and things like that. The ones that do well are the ones that approach this work and are positive about it, because it's not going to last forever. It's part of the learning process. It's kind of like paying your dues. Approach it with a good attitude, because you're just going to enjoy work. You're going to enjoy life better. If you're looking to see like what you can do, I mean, having a day job is pretty important, because you learn things at the office that are different than you learn in a startup environment. So you learn, discipline. You learn how to interact with other people. It's pretty important that you kind of have experiences in both. So my advice would be just to embrace it all and do it with a positive attitude, because positive attitude opens up doors everywhere. If you're kind of bitter or jaded, or think, I went to university, I don't want to do X job, well, you're just not going to advance in that job, and you're still spending your time there. So, approach it, look for opportunities, and now there's so many more startup communities and co-work locations where you can rent a desk, for 100, 200, maybe 300 tops dollars a month, and you can be in those environments. You can go to meetups, and you can see, okay, I'm a developer, or on the business side, or designer, and you can see if maybe there's opportunities to move into different areas. If you don't have kind of a foundation, though, you get desperate and you do work for things that you probably should be spending your time doing. So, yeah, a bunch of different advice, I guess, but somewhere in there, there's something.
Great advice. If you have questions for Bill, please post them in the comments below the video, and we'll ask him to come back and answer as many as he can. If you want to say thanks to Bill for coming on the show, post a comment below, or use the link just below the video to post a tweet and say thanks to Bill. We've got it all pre-packaged for you. It opens up Twitter to Bill at Karamouzis on Twitter. Or if you're coming to the Traffic Conference, right, Bill?
I am, yeah.
All right. So if you want to meet Bill in person, and you want to say thanks to Bill in person for inspiration, for the background he's provided, for his insights, come to the Traffic Conference October in Florida. I'll be there as well, and you can thank Bill in person. Bill Karamouzis, co-founder and CEO of TeachMe. Thank you for coming on the show, sharing your knowledge about startups and exact match domain names, and thanks for being a domain Sherpa.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And everyone, love to touch base, and send me an email, break something on the site, let me know, and good luck with whatever you're doing, and thanks for listening.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.